Hi, my name is Doug Kemmer. I'm an instructor with the Southside Virginia Community College. This video is about pre-trip inspection. Now the main reason we do pre-trip inspection, there are two reasons, but the main reason is for safety's sake. We want to make sure that the equipment is safe to go down the highway to operate, not only for our safety, but for the safety of the motoring public that's around us. Second reason is that it's required by law that each driver conduct a safety inspection or a pre-trip inspection of his equipment each day before he goes out on the road. Now this particular video is going to be about abbreviated pre-trip. We do this for the purposes of helping you to do it in a timely manner to get through your testing with DMV. Certainly a full pre-trip is a little more thorough, nothing new in parts or items, but to do both sides of the truck and trailer. It takes about 3 times longer to do this pre-trip because you have to verbalize it. In actuality, a pre-trip inspection like this would take somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes for a driver to do. But because you're verbalizing it, this pre-trip, even though it's abbreviated, will take somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm beginning with the approach to the truck, and as I approach the truck, I'm looking at its posture. If it is leaning to one side or the other, it's a strong indication that I either have a broken suspension item or a flat tire. Our truck looks to be in good shape. It's good and square with the ground. I'm also going to look up underneath the front of the truck, see if I have any dripping fluids or any kind of puddling fluids up there underneath the front, which would indicate I have leaks in the engine compartment. Also, as I approach, I'm looking at my lights up at above the cab there. I can see I have all my marker light lenses there. They're not cracked, broken, or missing. I don't see any missing hardware, and they are all the proper color, amber, as they face to the front. Looking at my windshield looks to be good shape. It's not cracked. I have a valid state inspection sticker on it. Also, I can see I have a valid state license plate on my front bumper there. My headlights and my turn signal marker lights there, I can see have good light lenses, no cracked, broken, or missing lenses. The light lenses are not fogged over, and of course those are both my high and low beam sealed beams there. And a marker and turn signal lights up on the fenders, again, nothing is cracked, broken, or missing, no missing hardware, and they are the proper color, amber. All right, I'm also checking out the grill, making sure that there's no obstructions to airflow through the grill. All looks to be good and intact. So I'm going to go ahead and come around to this side here, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my hood. All right, I've got my hood open now. So I'm going to go ahead and start again with the inspection here in the engine compartment. And I can see my windshield wiper blades got good tension on the arms, and the blades look to be good, soft and pliable, not broken or missing, not weak. As I come on down, I'm just looking into the engine compartment here, making sure I don't see anything that looks like it was leaking. Nothing's cracked or broken. Just the general appearance, everything looks to be where it should be mounted. Alright, so in order to inspect this, I'm going to go ahead, I have to pull this pin out and get this fender released. And I'll put my pin back in here. Alright, as I'm looking over the overall condition of my engine compartment, I'm looking up inside there, up in close to the engine block, making sure there's nothing that's damaged, nothing that's come loose, and I don't see any buildup of any kind of liquids or oils or anything that indicates any leaks. I would need to check my engine oil, which this is going to be the dipstick, and of course this is where I would add oil if it was low. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out my dipstick. I'll wipe it clean and replace it back in. Alright, so moving to the engine, again in here I can see this is my alternator, and it is belt driven. It has tensioners on the belt, but as I'm looking at the belt, I can see that the belts are not cracked, they're not frayed, they're not splitting, and they've got good tension on them. And as I come on down, I can see again that there's no signs of any leaking oils or any kind of damage down there in the lower part of my engine. I'm also going to be looking up inside here on this side of the engine. I need to check my power steering pump and my air compressor. Now on this truck, they're remote located towards the back. You can't really see them, but they are at the back there. They are gear driven off of the engine, and I just want to make sure they're not cracked, they're not damaged, they're not dented, there's nothing that's broken or leaking, and they're securely mounted. Also then, while I'm doing that, I need to check my reservoir, make sure that my reservoir level is at the proper level for the power steering. And of course, up here in this area, I'm also checking my radiator and my aftercooler, making sure they're securely mounted, that I don't have anything loose. All my hoses are good and soft, pliable. They're not dry rotted in any ways. And of course, I'm going to check my washer fluid to make sure I have an adequate level of washer fluid also in there for the truck. Right. Coming back out this way, I can see my frame. Checking the frame to make sure it's good and straight. There's no signs of any cracks or damage to it. It's not dented or twisted. I'm going to go ahead and start with my power steering. This is my power steering shaft, and I want to check it to make sure it's good and snug, it's not loose. Checking the power steering U-joint right here, just to make sure that it's not showing any signs of shiny metal. It looks to be greased, it's tight, there's no excessive play in it. This here is my steering gearbox, and I'm checking to make sure that my gearbox is firmly attached to the frame with its hardware here and in place, hardware over here, and just making sure that it doesn't have any signs of any leaks. This is my pitman arm, and it's attached to the shaft coming from my gearbox. Doesn't show any signs of any play or anything being loose, and it's attached down here with a capsule nut and a cotter pin that hold it to my drag link. This here is my drag link. I do not have any unmanufactured bends in it, and it is attached to the upper control arm with a large capsule nut and cotter pin. The upper control arm's in its proper position, and again, it's attached with a large capsule nut and cotter pin. Coming on to the back side, I can see down here, this is my lower control arm, and it is attached to the tie rod with a large capsule nut and cotter pin. Again, the lower control arm is in its proper position with a large capsule nut and cotter pin in place. Next item I'm going to inspect is my suspension system. Now this here has a leaf spring front suspension, so I'm looking at my spring mounts right here, checking the hardware, make sure it's all bolted to the frame correctly and nothing looks to be loose. My leaf springs are attached and in their proper position in the hanger. I do not have any cracked, broken, shifted, or missing leaf springs. Here's my rear hanger and the mount, and all the hardware is there and in place. Leaf springs in its proper position in there. All the bolts and hardware are there. Also, these are my U-bolts here and here. And I'm checking to see if I see any shiny metal. Shiny metal would indicate a loose or broken U-bolt. This is my shock absorber, and I'm checking it to make sure all the hardware is there and in place. Bushings are in place. I do not see any damage or leaks to the shock absorber. All right, so then I'm going to move on to my brake system. First thing I'm going to inspect with my brake system is my air lines. I want to make sure that they're not rubbing or chafing up against anything. Also, that they are not leaking. I don't see any cracked or any kind of damage to the hose, and I do not see, hear, or feel any leaks as I'm inspecting that hose. It's securely mounted to my brake chamber. The brake chamber has its hardware here and here in place, mounting it to the truck. The clamp is in its proper position and looks to be good and snug and tight, and it's not loose or damaged. Make sure that the brake chamber is not cracked, it's not dented, and it's not leaking. I also have no unmanufactured holes in my brake chamber, and the push rod and yoke are attached to my slack adjuster, and I have my retaining pin, or I'm sorry, the clevis pins and retaining pins on the ends here in their proper position. I have an automatic slack adjuster, but if I had manual slack adjusters, I could pull on that slack adjuster and make sure that with the brakes released that it does not move any more than 1 inch. Coming out to my foundation brakes, I have a dust cover on mine so I cannot see in there, but I would check that brake drum, make sure there's no excessive damage to it, there's no cracks, there's no broken or missing pieces. Also, I would want to check and make sure that my brake shoes have at least 1/4 inch of brake padding. There's no separation of the lining from the brake shoe itself, or no broken or missing chunks. I also do not see any kind of debris, oil, or grease buildup inside that brake drum that would indicate a leaking wheel seal. As I come on out, I'm looking at my rim. Again, no excessive damage, no cracks, no unmanufactured welding. And it's also, I'm going to come to my tire sidewall here, looking at it. I'm checking my tire sidewall, has no cuts, no cracks, and no bulges. My tire tread depth. On a steer tire, I need at least 4/32 of an inch. Coming out to the outside tire saw wall. Again, no cuts, no cracks, and no bulges. The rim has no excessive damage, no cracks, no unmanufactured welds. All my lug nuts are there and in place and accounted for, and I don't see any damage or dents or any kind of distortion to it. There's no rust trails, which would indicate a loose lug nut. Proper way to check my lug nuts is with a lug nut wrench. I can see also in the well of the wheel here that I do not have any puddling oil, which would indicate a leaking hub seal. This one, I have a cap here I can pull out. I can stick my finger in there and check it to make sure that I have an adequate amount of oil. This is my valve stem and cap, and a proper way to check my air pressure is with an air pressure gauge. Alright, so having finished this side, I'm going to go around to the passenger side. And on this side of the engine, I got a couple more items to inspect. Over here, first thing is I want to check my coolant level. Make sure that I have an adequate level of coolant for the engine. And again, I can take a look over here at the front of my engine. And down here, this is my water pump. And I just want to check that, make sure that it's good and secure, it's not loose, and there's no leaks from it. I can see my fan belt doesn't have any cuts, cracks, frays, or splits to it. And it looks to be in good condition and also tight. There's no free play or slack in it. And of course, my water pump there is belt driven. Also, I'm checking my filters. I can't really see them, but they're in those containers there just to make sure that the filters aren't leaking or damaged. And I'm going to inspect everything else on this side. All the other components in here, I would inspect on this side all the way out to the wheel, just like I did the other side. Alright, now as I come back over here to the driver's side, I want to come on down the side of the truck, so I'm going to make certain that my mirrors are firmly attached to the truck. Also come around this side, make sure that I don't have any cracked, broken, or missing lenses. I want to check my truck door, make sure that it opens and closes like it should. Also, while I've got the door open, I'll just check in here on the floor to make sure that I don't have any loose debris or anything that could get up underneath my pedals. Checking my grab handles, making sure that they're good and firmly attached. So as I close the door, I'm going to go ahead and check out here underneath the door is my battery box, and I want to check that by taking the battery box loose, open it up, look at my batteries, make sure they're securely mounted, make sure that I don't have any excessive corrosion on my connections, and also that there are no leaks. Close it back up. I would come over here to my steps, make sure they're free and clear of any kind of trip hazards, and make sure that they would hold my weight. I have my DEF tank right here, so I want to take this cap off. I want to check it on the inside, make sure I got a good seal in it, and make sure that I've got the cap back on and it's good and tight. It's good and securely mounted. I don't see any damage to it, and there's no visible signs of any leaks underneath it. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my diesel tank. I want to check and make sure it's not damaged. The straps aren't shifted on there. There's no signs of any damage or anything to it. It's not dented or bent up. I'm going to pull the fuel cap off. I want to check and make sure that my cap has a good seal in it. And I can see that I've got some fuel down in there. I'll check that. It's about a half a tank. Make sure that my gauge shows the same inside. Get my cap back on correctly and make sure it's good and snug. Also, again, checking the steps, make sure they're free and clear of any kind of trip hazards, and that again, making sure I don't have any leaks underneath my fuel tank. And also I can check the fuel filter here and make sure that it's properly mounted, it's not leaking, no apparent signs of any damage. Okay, so having finished with the fuel filter, before I go around the back of the cab, one other item that needs to be done is the emergency equipment list. So I'm going to open up this rear door here. First item on the list, there are 3 items. The first item is my 3 reflective triangles. So I'm going to go ahead and check inside this box right here. I can see I've got all 3 of my triangles here. Okay. And second item is my fire extinguisher, which in this truck is located up here in the front. And I want to check my fire extinguisher, make sure that it is securely mounted in place, it's not loose. Also, I want to check that gauge to make sure that the yellow needle is in the green arc, meaning it is fully charged, and it is. And then my third item is my spare fuses. I want to make sure that I have 1 spare fuse for every amperage that the truck uses. Now in this case, my spare fuse box is over there in front of the passenger seat. So once I've done that and covered all 3 of those, then it's onto the back of the cab of the truck. Coming around to the back of the cab, I want to check the overall general appearance of the cab. Make sure I don't have any obvious signs of any kind of damage or anything back here or anything that's broken. While I'm back here, I can also look at my exhaust on the other side there, and I just want to check to make sure that I don't have any brackets that are loose, no missing hardware, and I don't see any signs of soot trails anywhere that would indicate leaks. Also, I'm going to look at my grab handle here, make sure that my grab handle is firmly attached to the truck like it should be. I'm going to look at my catwalk. I want to make sure that the catwalk is firmly attached in its proper position. It's not loose. My steps are firmly attached to the side of the framework of the truck, and that all the steps are good and tight. No signs of any trip hazards. And I'll step on it to make sure that it holds my weight. Also, I'm looking at the frame rails to make sure that all the frames are good and straight. No signs of any visible damage, cracks, or anything that's twisted or dented. All that looks to be in good shape. Alright, so after doing the frame, before I get back here to the rear axle, I also need to check and inspect the drive shaft, and mainly looking at the universal joint here. Want to make sure that the shaft doesn't have any extra play in it, no signs of the universal joint being loose. And then also I want to check the shaft itself, make sure it's not twisted, it's not dented, doesn't have any kind of damage to it, and it's securely mounted in place. Then go on to the back to the drive axle. I want to check and make sure my rear axle is securely mounted in its proper position. All the bolts and hardware are there in place, and I don't see any leaking or puddling fluids up underneath there. Above it is my torsion bar, and I want to make sure the torsion bar is not damaged, it's secure, hardware is there in place, bushings look to be good. Same thing over here on the end where it connects to my frame. While I'm in here, I'm going to check my brake chambers. I can look at both sides. I can see my brake chambers are squarely mounted to the framework. I don't see anything that looks like I'm missing any of the hardware. The brake chambers themselves are not cracked, dented, or leaking. The air hoses look to be soft and pliable, They're not rubbing or chafing. I don't see any cuts or cracks, and I do not see, hear, or feel any leaks. Also, my brake chambers have their clamps in their proper position. This has 2 clamps on it, one forward, one behind, making sure that the hardware is in place as well, and there's no apparent signs of any damage there. I do not see any unmanufactured holes. All right, I'm going to come around here. I'm going to look, make sure that my push rod and yoke are attached to the slack adjuster with my clevis pins and then retaining pins on the other side. Again, this is an automatic slack adjuster, but if it were a manual one, I could pull on it with the brakes released, make sure that it moves less than an inch. Coming on out, I've got my suspension items here. So I'm looking at this leaf spring and this mount, making sure they're secure, all the hardware is there and in place, and that the leaf spring is in its proper position in the hanger. Bolts and hardware are there and in place. Leaf springs do not show any signs of being cracked, broken, shifted, or missing. U-bolts. U-bolts do not show any signs of shiny metal. Shiny metal would indicate a loose or broken U-bolt. My shock absorber. It's securely mounted in its proper position. It doesn't appear to be damaged. It's not leaking. Hardware is there and in place, and the bushings are there too. Coming out to my foundation brakes. Again, this has a dust cover on it, but I would look in there if I didn't have the dust cover, and I would check to make sure that my brake shoes have at least 1/4 inch of brake padding. They're not cracked, no chunks or broken or missing pieces separating from the shoe. I would also make sure that my brake drum doesn't have any excessive damage. It's not cracked, no broken or missing pieces from it. And I would also want to make sure that I do not have any signs of any grease or debris building up in there or oiliness that would indicate a leaking wheel seal. Looking at my rim, the rim does not show any signs of any excessive damage, no cracks, no unmanufactured welds. Coming on out to my tire sidewall, I do not have any cuts, no cracks, or no bulges on any of my sidewall. My drive tires on this need to be at least 2/32. Checking my inside tire sidewalls, have no cuts, no cracks, and no bulges. Rims have no excessive damage, no cracks, and no unmanufactured welds. I do not see any foreign objects trapped between my tires. Again, looking at my tread depth, at least 4/32. Outside of the tire sidewall has no cuts, no cracks, and no bulges. Also, my rim has no signs of any excessive damage, no cracks, no unmanufactured welding. My lug nuts are all there and accounted for. I do not see any damage or anything that's disturbed or distorted on any of that, and I don't see any rust trails between them, which would indicate that I have a loose lug nut. The proper way to check my lug nuts is with a lug nut wrench. All my bolts and hardware for the hub seal, and the hub is there, and I do not see any pulling oil in the well of the wheel, which would indicate that I have a leaking hub seal. My valve stems are in the proper position with caps. Proper way to check my air pressure is with an air pressure gauge. Coming around behind the wheel, I can see my airbag, and it's securely mounted up here to the frame, and the bag is not rubbing or chafing. It's not split. There's no cracks in it, no apparent signs of any damage or cuts. Again, the bottom mount is in its proper position, and I do not see or hear or feel any kind of leaks. While I'm here, I can see my fifth wheel mount, or my fifth wheel platform, and I can see all the hardware there mounting it to the frame of the truck. And then I have the sliding fifth wheel track, which is also mounted to that mount, and all the hardware and all for it is there and in place. Also, my locking pins are in the locked position. My locking handle for the kingpin jaws, it's in its retracted and locked position as it should be. Also, this is my pivot pin. It's in its proper position, and I have a retaining pin and cotter pin there to keep it in place. I do not see a gap between my fifth wheel and the trailer apron. The trailer apron is not dented or bent up. It's not cracked anywhere. I don't see any signs of any visible damage to the trailer apron. All right, then after I complete that axle, I'm going to move back to this rear axle, and I'm going to state that I would inspect this axle and everything on it, just like I did the forward axle. So I'm coming around to the very back of the tractor, and I'm going to go up underneath, but as I do, I want to check to make sure that my mud flap hanger is securely mounted. My mud flap is secure with all its hardware there and in place, and I can see my reflective tape there as I come in. Between reflective tape and reflectors, I should have 100% coverage across the back. While I'm also up here looking at my fifth wheel, making sure that the locking jaw is wrapped around the shank of the kingpin, above the head of the kingpin. But I need to, as much as possible, inspect my kingpin, making sure that it is not bent, it's not cracked, it's not damaged in any way, and it's securely locked there in place. Also, I'm going to check my lights, my light lenses back here, making sure that my reflectors and light lenses are not cracked, not broken, or missing. Again, mud flaps and hangers are good and secure, and 100% DOT tape. While I'm here, I can look up at the floor of my trailer and all my cross members, and for as far back as I can see that I don't have any damaged or missing or distorted supports, no holes in the floor. All looks to be in good order. Also, I'm looking at my landing gear here. The tie bar between the two is good. Bolts and hardware are there and in place. My braces are good and straight, firmly attached. Nothing that's loose or broken. The landing gear pads move, and they're properly located, and the pins for them are in their place. All looks to be good with that. As I come on up, I'm going to come around to the front of my trailer. And I'm going to check the overall condition of the trailer, making sure that the header board is good and strong. No signs of any rivets that have been popping loose or anything like that. Also, I can check my blister pack here. Vehicle registration, insurance stuff would be up inside there. I'm going to check my connector for the electrical system. Pull that out and just check, make sure I don't have any excessive corrosion. And up in here, I don't want to have any broken or missing or excessively corroded connections up in there or pins. And get that back in place. Also, I'm going to check my glad hands. I would check that to make sure the rubber grommet is in good shape. It's not split. It's not a bunch of chafed up or flipped over or bent underneath. It all looks to be in good shape. I'm going to put it back in its position. Also, I would check this one just as I did this side, and I would come over here and check my air lines where they attach and come back up underneath the cab of the truck. Make sure I don't have any signs of damage, no visible signs or audible signs of leaking either. And of course, my electrical connection, I would check to make sure that that is also the same, just as the way I inspected it on the front end of the trailer. All right, so coming around to go down the side of the trailer, I can see I have a valid state inspection. I'm also looking at the side of my trailer, checking all the rivets and all, making sure I don't have any excessive damage and there's nothing that's coming loose. And I have at least 50% DOT tape coming down the side. I have a side marker reflector and a turn signal marker light lens, and I want to make sure that they're, one, the proper color, and they are amber. Also, I want to make sure they're not cracked, broken, or missing. All right, and I'm going to go back up underneath the trailer here. As I come up underneath the trailer, first thing is I want to check my air lines here, make sure that they are properly suspended up off the ground. I can check my floor and my cross members. Floor is in good shape, no visible signs of any holes through it. Cross members are good, none that are missing or damaged. Coming on back here to the back, I can see that my locking handle for my sliding tandem is in the lock position, and the locking pin is in its lock position as well right here. Okay, so now I'm going to go back up underneath here to inspect these axles. I have a leaf spring suspension here, so I'm checking my spring hangers, spring mounts, and I'm checking to make sure that my leaf spring is in its proper position. It's not cracked, broken, or missing. My U-bolts Did not show any signs of shiny metal. Shiny metal would indicate a loose or broken U-bolt. My torque bar is in its proper position. Hardware is there and in place. Same thing on the opposite side. Also, then I'm going to go to my brake system. Now I can inspect both sides here on this. I can see my brake chambers. Brake chambers are securely mounted, and I do not see any missing hardware. I can see my air hoses and air lines. They are not rubbing or chafing. They're not cracked or split. And I do not see, hear, or feel any air leaks. The brake chambers themselves, again, securely mounted, and the brake clamp on a ring on both positions is there as it should be. All the hardware is there and in place. I do not see any cracked, dented, or leaking brake chambers. My push rod and the yoke are in their proper position with a clevis pin and a retaining pin holding them to the slack adjuster. Slack adjuster and all appears to be in its proper position. And again, with the brakes released, if it were manual slack adjusters, which I have automatic, but if they were manual slack adjusters, I could pull on, make sure they don't move more than an inch. All right, coming out to my foundation brakes here, I can see these don't have dust cover. So here are my brake pads, and my brake pads have at least 1/4 inch of brake lining. They are not cracked, broken, or missing. I don't have any chunks that are gone. My brake drum, it does not show any signs of any excessive wear. It's not cracked. There's no broken or missing pieces to it anywhere. And I don't see any grease or debris or oil or any kind of buildup in there inside my brake drum, which would indicate a leaking wheel seal. Coming to my rim, I can see my rim has no excessive damage, no cracks, and no unmanufactured welding. Tire sidewall has no cuts, no cracks, and no bulges. Coming out here to the tread depth, I have at least 2/32 tread depth on both tires. And on the sidewalls in between, I can see that I do not have any cut, cracked, or bulging tire sidewalls. My rims properly butted together. There's no spaces in between. Rims do not have any excessive damage, no cracks, no unmanufactured welds. And I do not have any foreign objects trapped between my tires. As I come on out, I'm going to come to the outside. Again, outside tire sidewall has no cuts, no cracks, and no bulges. The rim has no excessive damage, no cracks, and no unmanufactured welds. My lug nuts are all there and accounted for and in place. There's no signs of any damage to the lug nuts or distortions. There's no rust trails indicating that I have a loose lug nut. Proper way to check my lug nuts is with a lug nut wrench. This here is my hub seal, and I just want to make sure that I don't have any leaks around it. There's no puddling oil in the well of the wheel, which would indicate it leaking hub seal. I can pull this plug out, stick a finger in there. I have a sight glass here, and I can see sometimes if that's cleaned up that I have the proper level inside there. Proper way to check my air pressure is with an air pressure gauge. All right, so coming from that axle on the tire, I'm going to go back here. I need to check my equalizer. This is the equalizer here, and I'm just checking all my hardware is all there, tight, nothing's loose. And I can check up here to make sure I've got a gap where my finger will fit in there, and that way we know it can rock back and forth as it goes over uneven terrain going down the road. From there then, I'm going to come out. I'm going to inspect this axle and everything on it, just like I did that forward axle. I'm going to come back here, looking up underneath the back end of my trailer. I can see my floor and cross members. I don't see any signs of any damage or any holes in the floor. I can check my mud flaps, making sure my mud flap is securely bolted in place, making sure the mud flaps are attached well and not coming loose. This is my door retainer clip. Just want to make sure that it's there and attached solidly so I can keep my doors open. Checking my reflector, it's not cracked, broken, or missing. Light lens, it's not cracked, broken, or missing for the corner marker light. I'm going to come around to the back of the trailer, and as I'm looking at the back of my trailer, I'm just checking to make sure that all my hinges are there, the bolts are in place, doors are good and secure, the latches are in the lock position, handles are in their locked position as well, and I've got my ID lamps up across the top there, and they're not cracked, broken, or missing. Proper color is red on the back. I have 100% DOT tape across the back. My ICC bumper is securely attached. Lenses not cracked, broken, or missing. And again, a valid state license plate here with an illumination light. And the mud flaps are good and secure again. And I would inspect this side of the trailer just like I did the other side. Now I'm going to go around, come back up to the cab of the truck and get back in the cab and start doing the inspections in there. Also, I forgot to say about my landing gear handle. I just want to make sure it's good and secure, bolt and hardware is in place, and it's in the stowed position, or the stored position right there. So that's all good. So I'm going to go back to the cab. Alright, so as I approach the truck, I'm going to go ahead and get up in the cab of the truck. I'm going to go ahead and take the key out of my pocket. And as I get up inside the cab of the truck, I got a couple things I want to check right away as I'm coming in. First being the clutch pedal. I want to make sure I've got adequate free play in the clutch and that it's attached and works properly. The other thing is I'm going to check my gear lever here to make sure it's attached to the transmission and it's in the neutral position. I'll put my key in. I'm going to go ahead and turn the key on, and I'll get all these lights that come up here on my dash. And I just want to check and make sure that those are all the correct lights. Once they go out, then I will do a safe start. So I'm going to push my clutch all the way to the floor. I'm going to crank the engine. Once the engine starts, I'm gently going to release my clutch pedal. You can hear the alarm for the low air warning on my air brakes. Over here, I'm going to check my oil pressure. I've got good oil pressure, a little over 60. Engine's cool, so it's going to be high pressure. Up here is my water temperature, and it's cool. It's down at 140 degrees or less. Coming over here, this is my voltage, and I'm a little bit over 14, which is good. I should have somewhere between 13.5 and 15, so we're about 14.5, maybe closer to 15. And then of course my two air pressure gauges, my primary and my secondary, and they're both coming up just about to top off over 60 psi, and eventually that warning light and all the alarm will go out. So while that's happening though, I'm going to step out of my truck and I'm going to go out front and check the underneath the hood. But on my way out, I can also come over here where I can see my steer tire. So I'm going to check my steer tire, and I'm going to work my steering wheel to check and make sure that I have less than 10 degrees of free play in my steering. So as I'm working that back and forth, I can see the tire moving, and a little bit of free play in between moving it left and right. It's very subtle, very little, so that's less than 10 degrees. I'm going to come out and go up underneath the hood. And as I come out here, I'm checking to make sure I don't have any strange noises, no squealing, no knocking or anything like that, and I don't see any spraying fluids. Everything sounds right, looks right, should be normal. Everything looks good over there. So now I'm going to go ahead and close the hood. Alright, so I'm coming back around to the truck. I'm going to go ahead and get back up inside the cab. Now while the truck is warming up and building air pressure, I can check, make sure my windows go up and down as they should. I can check the mirrors on both sides, make sure they're properly adjusted. And then also I want to go ahead and check my seat belt and make sure that it latches like it should, and it does. Make sure that the belt isn't cut or frayed or have any splits in it. Alright, now again, other interior cab checks. my air conditioner is working fine, but I want to check my defroster, so I put it in a defrost position. Then I'm going to put my hand up here, and it'll take a few seconds before the controls turn over, but now I can feel the air blowing up on the windshield, which is very important. So I'm going to turn that back. Also, my fan, of course, is working. I also want to check and see that my horn works, and it does. I can check my right turn signal indicator, left turn signal indicator, check and make sure that my four-ways, they work. And I can also turn my interior or my headlamps on and show that the gauges do illuminate as they should. So that's good. All right. Also, I need to check my windshield wipers. So that's this control over here. So I'm going to make sure my windshield wipers work, and also that the washers spray, and they do, so I can keep a good clean windshield. All right. So I've got that stuff done. Now I need to go ahead and do my air brakes test. So you can see that the gauges are up above 125 or so, probably closer to 130, and that's good. So in order to do this first part of my air brakes test, I'm going to do the tug test first. In order to do the tug test, I'm going to go ahead and release my trailer brakes. I pushed in the red valve. Now, when I tug, I'm going to be tugging on my tractor brakes. So, again, I'm going to use my clutch all the way to the floor, put the gear lever in first gear, and now I'm going to gently tug on the truck, making sure that my brakes from the tractor hold, and they did. So now I'm going to go ahead and set the trailer brakes, but release my tractor brakes. Now, having done that, still in first gear, I'm going to go ahead and tug on my trailer brakes. And I have, and they held. So now I'll release those. With all the brakes on the truck and trailer released, I'm going to go ahead and ease forward just a little bit, and then I'm going to push the clutch in and use my brakes to come to a stop. Truck came to a stop just fine, didn't pull left or right. That's exactly the way we want it to be, and so we're good on that part. So that finishes the tug test. Now I want to make sure that I got my air pressure back up, so I'm going to give it a little bit of throttle to build that air pressure back up. If there's anything else I forgot to check inside the cab of the truck, I can do that while that's building up. Again, looking at my windshield, valid state inspection, windshield's good and clean. Talked about the mirrors, the horn, the defrosters, the wipers, wiper washers. All right, we're pretty close to the maximum pressure. There you could hear the dryer spit, so I know I'm at my maximum air pressure. So now I'm ready to go on and do my leak down test. So first thing I got to do with that is I'm going to go ahead and turn the key off. I want the key straight up and down. Once the engine stops, I'm going to turn the key back to the on position. All the lights on the dash are going to come up, come on, and then they will go out. Now, at this point, I do not start the truck back up. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the gear lever in a gear so it doesn't freewheel or roll. And then I'm going to reach over and I'm going to release my brakes. First thing is to look at my gauges. An initial drop should not be any greater than 20 psi. My needles are beginning to stabilize. Once they have stabilized, then I'm going to pull out a device to time it. So I get my phone here, and I'm going to turn it onto my stopwatch. Alright, so there's my stopwatch, and I'm going to start that. And during this time, I'm going to watch my gauges, and I'm going to watch that for 60 seconds. And I'm going to make sure that I do not lose any more than 2 psi for a tractor or 3 for a combination vehicle. We're a combination vehicle, so I'm going to watch to make sure it's no more than 3. For purposes of the video, I'm going to go ahead and stop my clock and move on so that we're not just sitting here watching a clock run down. All right, so after that, that is my overall system that I just checked. Now I want to check my service brake system. So I'm going to do the same thing, only this time I'm going to push on that pedal and I'm going to hold that. I'm going to come back up here to watch my gauges. I'm going to start my clock again, and with my clock running, I'm going to watch those two gauges, and I should not see any greater than a 3 psi loss for the tractor, 4 for a combination vehicle. And it looks to be pretty good, but I'm not going to wait for the time to run the whole way to the 60 seconds for reasons of this video. Alright, so we'll say that we've done that, but we would wait for 60 seconds. You got to have something to time it with when you're there with DMV. Alright, so that is my service brake test. I'm going to let go of those. Now the third step on this is to check my emergency warning system. The emergency warning system is going to be a light or lights that come up on my dash, plus the alarm that we heard earlier as the air pressure drops. Now the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to pump down on my pedal, and as I'm doing that, I'm watching my gauges here, and right there you can see the red lights came on, and you can hear the audible alarm, and it's right there at 60 psi, which is where it should be, at or around 60 psi. So that's my emergency warning system. Now I'm going to check my emergency brakes. I'm going to continue to pedal and fan down my brakes, and while I'm doing so, I watch over here to see that these two brake valves pop out on their own, and that should happen at or around 40 to 20 psi. In this case, you can see we got them both come out right at around 40, which is good. It's a new truck, so the system's working very well. Alright, and so that's my air brakes test. At this point, I can then push my clutch all the way in, put my gear lever into neutral, and conduct a safe start. Alright, so with that done, easing out on my clutch. Again, I'm checking my oil pressure. It's building. My engine's cool, somewhere below 140. My volts are around 14. Air pressure is building. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn my light switch on. I'm going to put my four-way flashers on. And now I'm going to conduct my last and final part of the pre-trip inspection. I will get out and check my lights. Alright, so I've come outside. I'm out around the front of the truck. First thing I'm going to do is check up there on the visor, make sure that all of my ID lamps and my clearance lamps have all lit, they're illuminated. I can see here on the front grille that I've got both of my headlights and my turn signal marker lights, or turn signal four-ways are there. I'm going to come down this side here. Again, top of my fender there, got my light on there, it's working. Lights at the top of the trailer, those are illuminated and working. Coming down to the side of my trailer, light is illuminated. I can also look up underneath, see that both of my lights up there have illuminated and they're blinking. Coming back to the back corner of the trailer, I have my illumination light there. My four-way flashers on the back, plus my tail lights and a license plate illumination light. All that's working well. And then of course I have my three lights up here that are my ID lamps on the back end of the trailer. Coming around to the driver's side again, corner marker light, it's lit. Coming up here to my middle marker light, which is lit. Again, I can see up underneath the tractor or the trailer there and see my other lights. Coming up to the front of my trailer, illumination light up there, it's hard to see in the daylight, but it is lit. And of course the fender light on this side. And then one last thing I need to do is put my high beams on. So I've done that. And I'm going to come around to the front. And it's the same light lens, but they're now in the high beam position. Both are illuminated, so I'm good to go there. And that is the final and completion of the pre-trip inspection.